Good evening. This is the continuance of our meeting that was canceled due to the failure of the power. We will be hearing Penny Lane. We'll have a truncated or shortened presentation of what they have done, not last time, but the previous meeting. You have out in the audience, there are public hearing procedures and rules. This is not a sporting event, nor is it a performance event. You don't applaud. This is a quasi-judicial hearing. And as such, we want to maintain decorum. Whether you're for or against something, we just want to, it's the facts that we're looking at. I realize that this is a very passionate topic. Frankly, all of these comprehensive permits have been incredibly passionate because they involve neighborhoods. And I appreciate that. You know, I'm a Warren resident. I've lived here for 33 years. My neighborhood has issues, and it is a hot button. I mean, there are things that have gone on in my neighborhood where I've been ticked off for days. I'll pass somebody and think, you know, my mind is going. I don't get to sleep at night. So I understand what a lot of you folks were going through, and I empathize with it and I understand it, as do all the members of the board. I mean, I speak for all of them in saying this is something we take very seriously. We are not here to rubber stamp anything. We are here to take a look at it, and we're here to listen to what you have to say as well. And that is important. I can't tell you how many times people have said things in these meetings that have moved us in one direction or another because it's information and a way of understanding it that we didn't have before we came here. So that's incredibly important. We're going to give the applicant time to present their development. I'm hoping it's less than 30 minutes. I'd actually like it to be.
Like 5.
Okay, great. And then after the applicant is finished, we'll ask the town staff for comment. Then the planning board members will ask the applicant questions of the proposal. Once there are no more questions, I'll open it up. You folks then can address your questions to the planning board, not to the group behind you, but to us. You know, the reason for that is because we're the ones who are making the decision. And as I said, it's not a performance. It's a, you know, it's a give and take. We're trying to understand what's going on here. People who want to speak must first state their name and address before speaking. Public comments, as I said, individual comments are limited to 3 to 5 minutes. I know that's a pain in the ass for some folks. It can take a while for some folks to get the information out, but in fairness to everybody and to this process, because we have not only Penny Lane today, but we also have Liberty Street, we need to keep things moving. So, you know, it's not that what you have to say is not of interest to us. You've really just got to work at being succinct in what you're saying. And if I say that's enough, I hope you'll respect the process enough to sit down and then let other folks speak. If somebody makes a point, you can simply say, I agree with what they said about the number of units or whatever it is. You want to have something new to say, or this is what I feel about it. That way we can keep those comments short. At the end of the public comment period, we close the public hearing and no more public testimony is allowed. So you'll hear it. I'll say the public hearing is closed. And at that point, you know, don't say, but wait, one more thing. You know, I can't honor that. And after the applicant then gets a chance to respond. So there's not a give and take. You make your statement as members of the public. And then from there, first it's the applicant. And of course, the planning board has heard it and they may amplify what they've heard. So if we all follow the process, this should go well. Again, please understand that we are looking at this as what is best for the town, and at the same time balancing that with what the law says and how we feel we may be able to work out a form of compromise, which is generally what happens in these situations. So I leave it to you.
So Fred?
Yeah.
Can I sort of say my piece about my presence here?
Oh, yes, sorry.
So my name is Mike Garrett. I'm a member of the planning board. I missed the meeting in late November, but I feel that I am conversant with all of the issues because I watched that meeting on YouTube, and I've also read the minutes. So this is, I feel that I am informed enough to continue to participate in the process. Thank you.
Thank you. So this, we do have a quorum here. Ashley Medeiros has recused herself, but she will be hearing the Liberty Street proposal. This is for 581 Child Street, Penny Lane, comprehensive permit, major land development. And at this point, I will ask to reopen the meeting. Motion to open the meeting. All right, so I made the motion and Matt seconded. Okay, so we'll have the applicant come forward.
Mr. Chairman, members of the board, Francis Spinella, FJS Associates, representing East Bay Community Development Corporation. With me this evening are Diane Medeiros, who's the Executive Director of East Bay CDC, which is the nonprofit affordable housing development agency for Barrington, Bristol, and Warren. Andy Glines, who is our engineer from Fuss and O'Neill. Paul Adaman, who is the architect from Union Studio. And Sam Budway, our attorney, here. So I don't know if you want to use any of the visuals or not, or I can just go give a brief overview of where we are. I don't need them, but if you want them.
Just a quick visual of what we're referring to. Again, we've gone over this, and in the interest of brevity.
So I can tell you that last year, I can say that now, we purchased the property from Teresa Catalano and her daughter. Her name is, she goes by Penny, which is why the name of Penny Lane came. She and her husband lived there for many years and actually approached us asking that she wanted to have her property be developed as affordable housing. So she approached the East Bay CDC board. We negotiated a purchase price, and here we are today. We currently own the property, and on it will be the 40 units that you see proposed. We will be keeping the house and where she currently is residing. And that will be converted into 2 apartments. And then the balance of 38 apartments will be built as new. The current barn and garage will be raised and new structures built for maintenance and office within the site. If you look at the top right of the plan, initially, when we drew the plan, we didn't know how far the setback was for the wetland. And so now it has, once we flagged it, had it surveyed and understood the real environmental implications, we cited the property and the apartments such that we're respecting all of the setbacks within the wetland. Included in the development will be the ability for charging stations for electric vehicles at the maintenance building and conduit for future proposed EVs. This would be a public road with the main road would be public. We would also have a gate for emergency access only to the adjoining neighborhood, hopefully encouraging walking as we have at Sweetbriar and community participation, but yet we didn't want it to become a cut through, and I'm sure the neighbors didn't want that either. So that's really the overview of the entire development. We have to go through after master plan, if we are so lucky to receive it. We also need to go to preliminary and then final. So it's a three-step process. But in addition to that, we have to get approval from the DOT at the state, because it's a state road for the physical alteration permit. And I think we're committed, and I know it's one of the conditions, should it be approved, to have a traffic study, which we would do. Additionally, we have Rhode Island DEM and Coastal Resources Management Council, because of the wetland, to seek their approval prior to final approval for any of the drainage or wetland issues. So there are some other steps that have to happen after master plan. Master plan is simply the concept. It is the permitting of the units. And as we dig deeper into preliminary, when we have real hard engineering and all the studies, and I know that your engineer, the town's engineer, has been engaged to review our engineer's design, then we would at that point come back for preliminary and final. Again, should we be approved at master plan. Timing, if we're so fortunate to receive approval, we would apply for funding this round at Rhode Island Housing, which is January 16th. And if awarded credits, the low-income housing tax credits, that would happen in May, June, April, May, June. I'm guessing May, June this year. And which means we wouldn't be under construction for at least a year from now. That's as quickly as it can go. There are, if anyone saw the announcement about 2 months ago from Rhode Island Housing and the governor's office, the amount of funding that is available for the creation of affordable housing is the highest it's ever been in the state, which is great for the construction of affordable housing. However, of the $90 million that's available currently, there'll probably be $250 million in applications throughout the state. So not every deal will get funded. And sometimes it takes 2 or 3 rounds, and it's only an annual round to get that funding. When we did Sweetbriar, it took 4 years because we ultimately ended up at the Supreme Court. And in Palmer Point was much quicker. But that is really the entire overview of the presentation. I'm happy to answer any questions of you.
Yeah.
So the folks that you anticipate needing,
I can hear you.
the people you anticipate living in this community, there have been some comments about the availability of public transportation, that many of them may not have private vehicles. Has that been considered at all?
So in most cases, in suburban areas like this, almost all of the residents drive, just like anyone who lives in any of the other neighborhoods in the area. So it is always a consideration. It opens the marketing up to a much greater population should we have public transportation. And I think that we would petition for maybe a flex bus or something, but we've never seen that as a detriment in any of the suburban areas. The need is so great locally, statewide, nationally, that no matter what the condition, good affordable housing will be used and will be filled.
So in the Barrington properties, have you had a lot of incidences of crime happening there?
It's funny that the last hearing that we did have, someone pointed out that there was a domestic issue at Sweetbriar. And in fact, that is true. There were 2 domestic issues that weekend when we just opened Sweetbriar after having gone to the Supreme Court. And the domestic issue at Sweetbriar was covered by every television station, newspaper, locally and statewide. And on Rumstick Point, there was a murder, another domestic issue that wasn't covered at all. So there is no incidence of crime greater in anything that we build versus the general population.
And like drugs or anything like that? And what
So,
happens if
People
a
with
resident-
means have more access to funds for drugs.
So you have not seen those issues in the Barrington community?
The difference between an affordable housing development that is built by the East Bay CDC or any other nonprofit within the state and funded by Rhode Island Housing is we have to do a background check on every resident that moves in. Anyone who rents to anybody else, if you are just a landlord and own property, you can rent to anybody you want. So who can pay the highest dollar? We have such we are criticized and looked at so closely by the state because we're using federal funds and state funds that those incidences are probably lower than any other community.
So what happens if there is a resident that is,
So we actually had someone, not in an East Bay property, but another client's properties that was found to be doing something illegal and they were evicted.
good, glad to hear that. How about the property values of the abutters and the surrounding
I know.
communities?
After the last hearing, one of the members had actually asked that question in an email to Diane. And so nationally, there have been many studies over the 40 plus years of the low-income housing tax credit program of does affordable housing affect the values of neighboring properties? And in fact, in every instance, if you just Google it, it will tell you no. And in fact, because the low-income housing tax credit developments are professionally managed, marketed, and watched, there are managers on site as opposed to other potential developments that the property is kept better. We are required every 15 years to renovate and refinance. So in Sweetbriar, which is 15 years old now, we had to find things within the property to redo, which we're in the process of going to be renovating that this year. So I did print an article from Bloomberg that I knew that question would come up. So if you don't mind, I can certainly. I think I have enough for the whole board.
Do you have information for Barrington specific? If it's had any impact on their property values?
It would be the exact same as nationally. So the case in Barrington is the exact same as it would be nationally. No. Affordable housing does not affect the property values of neighboring properties.
Okay. Could you back that up with some information from Barrington specific?
I think by
Would you be willing to do that?
absolutely.
Okay, that would be interesting. I think to the community also to see for sure. I mean, I anticipate that the answer is going to be no, because Barrington is very expensive. And those houses don't stay on the market very long. And when you're right over there, you don't see any for sale.
I think that it's,
However,
yes.
it would be nice, and our attorney suggested that tax assessor's office might be the best.
So I can tell you that the latest development we did was Palmer Point. And the property values in the adjoining neighborhood appreciated at the same rate as any other property within the town. So that's as specific as we can get. And I think that answers your question.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
Could I just suggest that since the applicant has heard that particular concern, that should they receive an approval tonight, that their preliminary plan could include such information, since that would be the most detailed application we would get anyway. So I think would just be understood, and their consultants are here as well, so they would know what to do.
Thank
Anything
you.
else?
Thank you. That's what I had.
Okay, any other questions before the public hearing? Again, we will listen to what folks have to say and then close the public hearing and comment.
I'll ask a question.
Sure, man. Yeah, did I mention the phones?
And I guess this. I guess this question, I'm gonna say a couple things and then I guess the question more is for town solicitor. Cause as I ponder and as I've spent time like looking over all, the application, all that sort of thing. And I came, prior to this, I was on the zoning board. So I had that kind of mindset. When I look at the conditions for approving or denying a comprehensive permit, any of the denying, reasons suffice for a deny. And one of them is the proposal is not consistent with local zoning ordinances and procedures promulgated in conformance with the comprehensive plan. When I look at the Penny Lane proposal, there's side yard setback, rear yard setback, front yard setback, max building lot coverage, buildings too close, multifamily housing in R40. When I look at our zoning ordinances for Warren, they're pretty explicit about when a variance can be, granted. And they're very explicit too, like on rear or side yard requirement. The zoning board of review shall not permit such a variance in excess of 1/3 of the required distance. So the proposal is in direct violation of a number of the zoning laws that we have. So I guess I'm curious, from a perspective of a comprehensive permit, it's my understanding that because of this law in Rhode Island, it's unclear to me how much of that I am allowed to weigh in terms of if I put together a very cogent argument of why I think it would make more sense to have fewer variances requested, and that being something that's weighing me towards approving or denying. How does that stand in terms of appeals and the various things? Do you follow my question?
I do. So let me just clarify what you're looking at in terms of zoning requirements. The standards for variance in the zoning are different and distinct from the standard that you are applying towards waivers/variance. It's not the same standards that the planning board is to give a variance that they're requesting versus the standards that you are used to at the zoning board.
Well, but in the Rhode Island, denying or approving of a comprehensive permit, it has explicit things of what can be approved or denied. And so one of them is the proposal is not consistent with local zoning ordinances. That's what I'm trying to understand. I'm not trying to put you on the spot. If it's
No,
something
that's
that I-
fine. So basically the standard that one is to apply sitting as a planning board is the need for local housing versus the requirements by zoning. And that's the weight. And when we're at 4%, I think that's the balancing act in terms of what we're giving up compared to the affordable housing in town and the need for it, not only here in Warren, but statewide, versus the standards that you apply in the zoning board.
So then the local planning boards are kind of they're weighing that. And the thing that I find myself puzzling about is that, as a town, we've put certain things codified in terms of zoning. I jump back to this other one. I mean, it's explicitly not permitted to have a side or a rear yard in excess of 1/3 of the variance. And so it seems as though when we assume the position of the zoning board at the same time, I'm just looking for some, if I stand on that, is that automatically gonna lose in a higher court? Because that's.
I don't want to give you a decision
Yeah.
in public as to my legal opinion. However, I would say that if you're looking at denial B, the proposal is not consistent with local needs, including but not limited to,
The
the local needs. So for example, if this town had 10%, now you can strictly apply the zoning ordinance in terms of, nope, this is what we're meeting our local needs in terms of affordable housing. And therefore you can take a stricter interpretation of application of the zoning regulations in place.
Okay.
So I have a related question. There's been an argument as to which zoning regulation should apply, R40 or R10.
It's R40.
I believe it's an R40 zone, therefore that's the applicable, if this was a traditional application going before the zoning board, that's what it would be considered.
Does the fact that this is a comprehensive permit alter that?
Can you repeat the question?
Well, I think you've answered it. Essentially, you're saying that it's the R40 zoning requirements that we should apply?
That's what they're asking waivers from. That's the standard, the R40 standards, regulations, correct.
Yes, the zone, it's R40. Some might argue that it's spot zoned as R40 since everything around it is R10, and this is the only R40 lot. However, in the comprehensive plan update, this has been selected as a site for affordable housing within the community, as well as under the comprehensive permit. And this board, I don't even know if you were, Mr. Massey, if you were on the board when the law was first passed, that I trained this board in how to deal with comprehensive permits. I don't think anyone else was here for sure, but so yeah, we have to apply our waivers under the underlying zone that it's currently in. However, under the comprehensive permit, you have to look at it. And at the end of every one of those clauses within the permitting or denying categories, it always says, just like your solicitor had just said, was subject to your need for affordable housing.
Which carries greater weight in terms of the requested variance, as opposed to a standard application that is
Absolutely.
not coming in under the comprehensive permit.
Absolutely. Just as your solicitor suggested, that had you been at 10%, if you were at 10%, first of all, the comprehensive plan doesn't apply if a town is at 10% or greater. We could not come before you if you were making great strides towards the 10% or at past 10%. So I think that by approving good developments, you have better standing when others come before you.
This being fully affordable, which would help me toward the 10%, as opposed to those that have 25%, which don't do anything toward increasing the amount of
I mean,
affordable
a
housing.
little-
In fact, work against it.
A little bit self-serving, but yes, you denied a property on Water Street, I believe.
Yeah.
And you would have way more justification should you approve a development like this, because you could say, okay, that didn't make sense because it was only a small percentage of affordable housing and it really doesn't help us get to 10%. Some might say you need to be at like 40% of affordable housing in a development just to get past, because as you build affordable housing and you only have a small percentage of affordable housing and you have the rest market rate, you're actually treading water. You're really not making any grounds.
One other question, in terms of Palmer Point, Sweetbriar, and Penny Lane. Palmer Point and Sweetbriar were both 8+ acres.
Mhm.
The space delineated for that you purchased.
Correct.
And so the 40 odd units in both of those were predicated on a larger parcel of land.
Except that on Palmer Point, it's actually only about exactly the same size of buildable acreage.
But the,
The entire parcel was larger.
right, and is that used in terms of the number of units that are allowed within that parcel of land? If you have an 8.7 acre parcel and you're asking for a certain number of units,
It's only the buildable property that is
then
contemplated.
is that true, Ben?
I would have to do some research on that particular issue, whether or not what's considered in terms of density is the buildable area or the entire lot.
Because it's a key point. All along, there's been a comparison of the three
Mhm.
to this area, but this area is 4.5, and those are twice the size. So levels of density, it would seem to me, would change based on the size of the parcel.
And the way-
Granting a variance.
But also the way that the parcel lays out, I think if you had a much more square parcel, you could do some different things versus narrower parcels with, if, I think that if every parcel is different, soils and drainage make up a lot of the definition of that. But under the comprehensive permit, you don't have those same parameters on a per acre basis. In fact, I think the law that is now changed allows for a much greater density.
My understanding, though, is that this is not under that new law.
It is not.
Correct.
So again, the important point here is amount of density. I mean, we're talking about 40 units, which equals probably 100 people, thereabouts. Because some are 2 units, some are 3. That is an intense density variance based on the size of the parcel versus the 2 in Barrington. I mean, not having sat on the zoning board, I don't know, but as we're sitting as the zoning board and as you're looking for a variance that is well above what would ordinarily be allowed in R40, this does seem larger than the comparisons that were used when we were talking about Palmer Point and Sweet Park. Architecturally the same, space the same, but the difference is that the volume or the density of that is significantly different if you've got an extra 4 acres, whether it's buildable or not, it's buffer, which also creates setbacks, a different issue for setbacks.
Mhm.
So I just, wanted to make that clear, and we can talk about that.
I guess just jumping on that point, jumping back to the setbacks and the density, the variances proposed for the side yard setback, that's 50% less than required. The rear yard setback is 63% less. The front yard setback is 38% less. The max building lot coverage is 40% more. So density in terms of the variances, it seems like as I read through the variances that you guys are pursuing or requesting, it's exacerbated by the density of 40. So that's what comes up into my mind in terms of I could trying to
So-
envision.
So they're waivers under the comprehensive permit, not variances, but also any of those waivers, most of them are from the road we're creating, not any of the abutting properties.
Well, it still pushes the housing units closer to the neighboring houses. I mean.
I don't
which
think
requires a
by
setback.
reducing density, we really it wouldn't change any of those requests. maybe two. A couple of the side yards between our own buildings, but aside from that, it wouldn't change anything.
Oh, it would certainly mean a lot fewer people. I mean, using the math from 4.5 acres against the others, that ratio comes out to closer to 25 units than 40, based on the acreage available.
Which would make it infeasible.
Okay, so, from an economic standpoint,
It's infeasible if it's less than 40. 50 is really the sweet point right now in financing with Rhode Island Housing. 25 would make it infeasible. I can tell you other communities that I have built 60 units on a half an acre in Rhode Island.
well, that's not.
Which is not here.
It ain't gonna happen.
Right. Nor would we propose that.
All right, well, we can talk about this. I think it's time to open up for the public hearing.
Can I just ask one clarifying question? What I thought I heard you just say is that if density, notwithstanding the viability of the project, that if the density reduced, it wouldn't reduce the side backs. When I look at the top-down view and I look at the 60-foot rear yard setback, which is required for an R40, all of the homes are, at least on the south side, I think I'm a little bit turned around, are within that. So, I mean, if it were a drastic density reduction, it would change some of the waivers being requested.
And it would be infeasible at that point.
Okay.
Did you wanna?
Yeah, sorry. Mr. Chairman, board members, Samuel Budway on behalf of the applicant. I just want to point your attention to, and I've spoken with the solicitor, and I'll allow the solicitor to weigh in as well, but section 32-76.2A of your own zoning ordinance outlines that any unsuitable land, and this applies to both your ordinance and because your ordinance was adopted in uniform with all other zoning ordinances in reliance upon the State Zoning Enabling Act, unsuitable land does not go into the calculation for density. And so comparing this to Sweetbriar, comparing this to Palmer Point doesn't really take into account the fact that unsuitable land or land that cannot take development is in fact not used for density calculations and would not weigh in on waivers.
But was that unsuitable land in Sweetbriar?
Correct,
Palmer Point?
correct. So that's why, and I'll let your solicitor weigh in.
Ben, did you?
The entire rear half of the Palmer Point development is all of the CRMC buffer.
Right.
So as I said before, we have almost the same amount of property and buildable property as we did at Palmer Point.
Yeah, again, I'm trying to understand.
Yeah.
that if you've got, an 8-acre parcel, it would seem to me that that would play into the thinking of whoever
Right.
it was that was making that decision. I don't know what the decision was in Barrington, because I wasn't there, but, again, I think one of the main concerns here is the density in this area, despite the fact that it has worked in an area in Barrington, there are greater buffers there because of the larger size of the parcel,
Only one greater buffer, which is at the back towards the water. Everything else was quite similar to here.
I'm gonna open this up to the public hearing. Is that okay with you, Ben?
Yes, motion to open public hearing.
Okay,
Thank you very much.
yeah, thank you, Frank. Motion to open this to public hearing,
I'll make the motion.
second, Mike Gerhard, all in favor? Aye. Before we start, we have received a number of letters, which were forwarded to us. We've had a chance to read those. There were also some letters that came in less than 48 hours prior to the meeting. We have that correspondence here. As I said, the last meeting, we have a lot to look at. And so when it comes in less than 48 hours prior to the meeting, it makes it really hard to read it. Doesn't mean that we're not going to look at it. We are. But I just want you to be aware that all of those letters that you sent within the time were all read and they have all been read into the record, so they will be part of the record. And there was, which is the case not only with Penny Lane, but also with Liberty Street. So I'm gonna open it up now again. As we said, you can come up to the front, name, address, and speak 3 to 5 minutes. So anyone care to kick it off?
There's not a lot of names on that map, but the one that is mine, Rhett Nansen, 25 Colonial Drive. I'm sorry, I'm really nervous. My watch is telling me my heart rate's over 125. But I did prepare something. It's less than 3 minutes. You were talking about property values in Barrington, but nobody's mentioned the schools. I have a friend that lives near the Palmer River, Palmer Point, and his main complaint was that he had to pull his daughter out of school because the children that were coming in were just, causing a lot of ruckus. The teachers couldn't concentrate on the children that wanted to be there. But I just wanted to say that. Anyway, so I have this prepared. I'll read it. I would say that I'm disappointed in the town government of Warren. It's bad enough that corporations are snatching up every last morsel of land and turning it into rental property. This one actually has the nerve to ask us to pay for it as well. They want the tax benefits. They want the waivers to fees. They want us to believe that it's for our own good, but who benefits from all of this? The ruse of affordable housing or low to medium income housing is just a lie. Nobody aspires to get an apartment unless you still live in the Soviet Union. People want to own a home. But that's not what they're offering. They're offering indentured servitude, a lifetime of paying for something that you will never own. Meanwhile, the taxpayers get to foot the bill while both watching their property values decline and their taxes go up. This entity has millions of dollars in assets. The director makes over $100,000 a year, which is more than the median household income of Warren. And they cry broke over a $1,000 fee on what, a $14 million project? Never mind that they completely ignore the zoning and building rules. They aren't asking for a little fudge here and there. They're asking to completely ignore the zoning regulations. They want to cut them in half or more. They can't even be bothered to build the curbs to town specs. What's the point of having these zoning guidelines if we're just going to ignore them? I thought the purpose of them was to keep us from becoming an urban hellscape. I really like this town. Previously, I spent more than 20 years in a downtown Bristol rental, and I watched the college rentals ruin that market. So I bought a nice little house at the end of a dead-end street in a dead-end neighborhood where my children can walk to schools and playgrounds, and I don't have to worry about a lot of through traffic. We have nature right outside our door. Every day there are deer, turkeys, fox, coyotes, and more birds than I can name. And now you want to build a rental 20 feet from my yard? Renters don't care about their property because it's not theirs, and it never will be. If you want to build affordable housing, like to purchase, on this little farm, I can accept that. I don't like it, but I can accept it, provided you follow the zoning guidelines as they were written. As I heard said in the last town meeting about a different project, if you don't have the space to build your project as the zoning requires, you don't have the space to build your project. Redesign it and try again. The citizens of Warren are not obligated to look out for your profit margins. I would kindly ask the town planning committee to please take careful consideration when it comes to this project. Please don't ruin Warren just as it's gaining traction as a community to be envious of. Warren doesn't need low-income rental properties, but Warren could use affordable housing. Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Joan Hunt. I live at 11 Colonial Drive, which is the access road. I have some questions and some points I'd like to make. And what is the contributing tax base? Who will actually pay for this development? These are rental properties. How are the landlords going to contribute tax-wise to education, police, fire, et cetera, et cetera? Children will be part of that community. So what does it cost to educate a child living not only in that development, but in the town of Warren itself? If it costs, say, $23,000 per child, add a big bond that has to be paid. Taxes will increase and it will put a big burden on the senior citizens living in town, who will pay for this also. This is important. This area here is a single-family neighborhood. How is this development going to impact our neighborhood with traffic, children playing outside, and all of that? We in the neighborhood are not against affordable housing, but many of us have lived in this neighborhood a long time. I myself have been there at 11 Colonial Drive for 58 years, so I've seen everything come and go. And to develop and change our neighborhood is just wrong. We are a small coastal community, not an urban one. This is not a feasible area for a development of that size. Another important factor, which was mentioned before, is that there is no public transport on Child Street. Also, regarding the affordable housing, after, say, I don't know what it is, 10 years, we'll say that, it can become Section 8. Affordable housing is income-based. Section 8 is a voucher where they pay a certain percentage and we, the taxpayers, pay the rest. Instead of concentrating on the people who don't live here yet, we should be taking steps to take care of the people in our town today. This is a development that would not be healthy for the people in this area. How will you assure that only Warren people will live here? What about our senior citizens, our veterans? How much housing is committed in town to senior and veterans now? This will be a high-density housing complex in a low-density established neighborhood. What is Warren's comprehensive plan? What about the access road at the end of Colonial Drive? And the value of our homes will decrease if it becomes a high-density area. Who will be the owner of the development? Who will take care of the property? Will it look nice for a while and after that become shabby and run down? What about all the traffic and everything that's going to be coming through the access road, which is only supposed to be used for that? Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Give me a second to get this back up again. I don't newspaper much anymore. My name is Jenny Flanagan. I live at 46 Washington Street. I'm also a trustee of the Warren Land Trust, as well as its treasurer and past president. The Warren Land Trust is an abutter to the Penny Lane project. I am here today to say I am in favor of this proposal with a small qualification. For many years, I have understood that land conservation and affordable housing are two sides of the same coin for sustainable communities. We need both to protect our valuable environmental resources and support the full range of residents in this town we call home. I was on the East Bay Community Development Board back in the 1990s, and I'm really proud of the work that they have done. While I was not on their board when their two projects in Barrington were proposed and then built, I have since that time seen how these projects have integrated with the fabric of that community. I believe that the Penny Lane project can provide the same community strength to Warren. And the fact that this project is geared towards folks in the 60 to 80% income levels is some of the best news for me. This would provide a place where residents like my son, who has worked full-time for the past 7 years in the dining service at Roger Williams University, can find an affordable place to live here in town. With regard to conservation concerns, the land trust stewards the conservation land to the rear, south and east of this project. It's on the right-hand side of that picture there. The Land Trust Board is pleased that the current proposal has recognized the maximum defined CRMC wetland resource protection, creating an open space buffer in the rear corner of the property. The primary concern the Land Trust has about the Penny Lane proposal is how close the rearmost dwellings will be to our conservation land. The proposal asks for a variance for the building setbacks from the rear lot line. Specifically, they were proposing that the three decks on the rear of those dwellings be roughly 22 feet from our property line and the conservation land. The Land Trust respectfully requests that no structures, building or decks be within 30 feet of our conservation land. We also request that fencing be installed along the Land Trust property line, at least behind these dwellings. Overall, though, the Warren Land Trust supports this proposal and looks forward to the East Bay CDC looks forward to working with the East Bay CDC on our overlapping missions for building and protecting healthy and sustainable communities.
My name is Prima Howard, and I kind of represent the Collins Circle, Colonial Drive, and Paul Court. I only have 2 points, and I thank you for addressing the density issues that we brought up in our letter. And although I don't understand why it should be, because we did our due diligence, we went to Sweetbriar and we went to Palmer Point. And then we researched that Palmer Point has 9.5 acres and Sweetbriar has 8.5 acres. And this one is only 4.5 acres, but from the explanation, I can understand a little bit of it. We were here before because the soccer field was built behind our property. And we agreed with the town council, or they promised us anyway, that we can have concessions because we couldn't stop it because it's already in the works. And so we asked that the Paul Court, which is supposed to be a closed road, because it's a cul-de-sac, and we didn't want people to walk through to the as pedestrian or park on those streets to access the soccer field at the Hugh Coles area. But anyway, they gave us 3 concessions, that they're going to put a no outlet sign in front of the Colonial Drive, and then only emergency vehicles will go on Paul Court, and no parking on any of those streets, including Collins Circle. I would like to ask the developers, how will this impact our neighborhood? Will they then open Paul Court so that the pedestrians could go to the soccer field, go to Hugh Coles, and go to KMS? On Colonial Drive, I read on section 3(2)B that it's going to be for emergency vehicle also, but they will park a dumpster there in front of 25 Colonial Road and the across the street, which is Paul Court. So I read from their master plan that something will be, the Paul Court could be open for pedestrian. Correct me if I'm wrong. But will the town council honor what they promised us? They also promised us that they will put we asked for buffer, just trees, arborvitae trees, so that the abutters on our Colonial Road will be able to work at home without the soccer field noise and all that. But up to now, the town manager have left and we never heard from them. They did inquire at the local tree places, nursery places, but we never heard what happened to that. So that's another promise that was not kept. So we're kind of skeptical that every time something is done in our neighborhood, can we trust our town council to honor what they tell us? And thank you so much for their time.
John Carter, 59 Boulder Hill Road. Everybody who pays attention to the housing market knows that housing prices are going up at an almost alarming rate. Interest rates on mortgages have also gone way up. Wages across the board have not gone up at nearly the same rate that housing prices have. We also have a memory of what has happened over the past number of years. We had an artificial shutdown of our economy put in place by politicians. You can look this up. 80% of all United States currency currently in circulation has been printed since 2020. Every day you turn on the TV and you see another Rhode Island politician advocating for things like windmills, solar energy, and other climate-friendly policies. At the same time, they advocate against the use and production of fossil fuels, aka cheap, reliable, and abundant sources of energy that enable human prosperity. Point is, this housing crisis is directly a result of policies put in place by the same politicians who now tell us we need more affordable housing. The proposed 40-unit affordable housing project for Child Street is a poverty trap. There is no way around that when people that are going to live in these units are not allowed to make more than a certain amount of money. You are artificially keeping people at a wage level below what they are able to achieve. Another reason it is a poverty trap is that if a resident of one of these units works harder and makes slightly above what they are allowed to make, they will be kicked out and forced to find different housing, which admittedly is more expensive. So it may seem all well and good, you call it affordable housing, which gives it a nice, happy name and gives politicians good feelings about helping the poor, but this will not help anybody. It will further trap people in poverty and it will keep them there. Aside from being a poverty trap, this is incredibly short-sighted. I don't understand why anybody wants to destroy a beautiful cornfield, a place where all types of wildlife live, and put in a housing complex. What will this complex look like in 30 years? Who is going to pay for these renovations? Who is going to keep it up? Who is going to police this place for trash and litter and drugs and crime? Rhode Island should be looking at new tax cuts, regulation cuts, ways to bring our energy costs down, and ways to make our town and state more business friendly. We should not be building poverty trap housing projects. Thank you.
My name is Steve Silver. I'm from 22 Mayo Drive. My concern is going to be one, the main drainage from this whole development. It's already highly saturated in water. You're going to bring all the water from the rooftops, driveways, streets into one pipe coming out. How is that going to be mitigated? Is they going to draw a complete new pipeline to bring this water out past where it's already overly saturated? The second is going to be I don't know who I was told this was somebody, I'm not positive on it. The engineers that are working for the town of Warren that oversee this and the engineers that are working for the salesman that just gave you the pitch for this property are the same. Is that true?
That's not true.
Thank you very much for clarifying that. The next thing is you got to also realize we are in a financial bind. This property, if you put one child per bedroom, could increase our tax base by $1 million just schooling alone. This is going to be a big tax burden on all of us. And I think that should be looked at as well. My opinion, there should be no variances given whatsoever on this property. They the laws are now that they can put something there. We know that and we accept that. It should be at least minimum of 50% of what they're proposing. This is just absurd. Thank you very much.
Hi, my name's Anthony Sargento. The reason I'm here is because I feel that these variances, there's way too many. There are about 15 or so variances or waivers, as they call them. That's one good reason why we shouldn't accept it. We're really changing the rules and the guidelines of the town of Warren. Rain runoff. I took a ride by the Palmer Point yesterday. They have drainage ditches that run along the side. They got big, large stones, and I don't know if there's pipe or whatever that route it from one point to the other. What happens is the runoff comes off the roof, down the gutters, off to the side of the house, and right now, from what I see, it's directing the water right down to the Palmer River. The other thing is we have the snow removal. Snow removal, where's it all gonna go? How is people gonna function in that tight area when we have a blizzard? And there's no place to put the snow. They have an area of maybe 90 parking spots on this parcel. It's gonna be gridlock. The sewers. As far as what I read, we have a study that's supposed to be done on the sewer that goes out to Child Street and the one that goes back to Colonial Drive. Are the sewer lines large enough? Are they gonna accept all this? Do we need a pumping station? Who's gonna pay for it? Has anybody introduced the topography map to show how are they gonna grade this property? Where is the runoff gonna go? Is it gonna affect neighbors who have no water problems now, but they will have them later on? And is there gonna be a legal consequence at the end to the town of Warren for water damage that isn't there presently? Other than that, it's gonna affect our police department, fire, rescue, town maintenance. Who's gonna maintain these roads? Who's gonna collect trash? Where is the trash gonna be? Is the trash gonna bring in rodents that we don't need in our neighborhood? I worked in commercial construction my whole life. Wherever there's food or garbage, you see rodents. I don't want to see that in the neighborhood. And that's pretty much it. That's all I got to say.
Good evening, members of the board, Housing Authority. That is a beautiful piece of property. It is beautiful. I live directly next door. My name's Robert Franco, 571 Charles Street. If there was a way, beautiful piece of property, you could sell one lot, maybe two lots. Or maybe a young couple wants to move in with their kids and be a farmer. You know what I'm saying? Plenty of ways to make money on the land. All I'm saying, everybody knows, we know about the traffic, we know about, I'm gonna be looking at these big, huge apartments buildings. And I lived there for 21 years, paying taxes. And that's all I really have to say. If they were to build something, you really have to downsize it dramatically, not open up a road in the back, affecting the people. When I mean dramatically, I mean dramatically. And I would like them to rename the whole plan. Instead of Penny Lane, how about King's Court? At least Mr. King, he was almost like a legend, and he put the town of Warren on the map. And he's not getting no gratitude because he's resting in his grave for everything that he worked. And all these members, all these residents over here, could I please have an aye who oppose it?
Okay, I'm gonna have to ask you to sit down. I asked you not to do that, so thanks. I appreciate your. All right, listen, no, no.
My name is Paul Croto. I live on 33 Fern Drive. This is a wonderful neighborhood. I've been here I'm gonna be in my 40th year. Believe it or not, I don't know if you realize, but that whole neighborhood is almost all originals, or at least long-term members. Some of the new people, 30 years or so. We get along well with them, and there are a few people who are really new. But this is a great neighborhood. When you pull onto Fern Drive, the first 5 houses on the left and the first 3 houses on the right are original, which means they're well up in the 30s. Do I think this is going to impact us negatively? Yes. And I appreciate the board for realizing that this is just too dense for this. And the only other thing I can say is if they're saying it's not feasible, then it's not feasible. You don't squeeze in more than than this area permits. This area is set up well the way it is. I love this town. I want to stay here forever. A lot of us were hoping to die here, but we are worried about this and how it's going to affect us. And I think I speak for almost everyone here. No, not everyone, but almost everyone. That we don't want this. And I appreciate the board. I appreciate your consideration. I know you'll make the best decision. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Alvin Federico. I'm 14 Fern Drive. I have a very brief story shared with permission of my wife because I value my sanity. So basically the story goes is my main issue with this is one that it does not fit the neighborhood, and they're sorry, they're all rentals. We're not actually helping anyone by making them rentals. And to share the story with my wife is my wife actually started in an affordable housing home in Providence. She was in her 20s. She was a secretary at the Miriam Hospital. She was able to get into an affordable house, which she could own. With the security of a home, she was able to go back to nursing school, become a nurse. And that's how we met at Rhode Island Hospital. Fast forward a few years, we get married, we decide to have children. None of that happens without affordable housing. However, the biggest issue I have is the equity that we built into that house by owning it allowed us to purchase our property in Warren. By the developer maintaining exclusive control of the property, they receive the asset benefit, which as of 2023 was roughly $330 million. That asset benefit not going to the owner of the home causes more damage than it does good. You're not actually fixing the problem. And coming from the generation where millennials have some of the lowest home ownership rates, the project doesn't serve the purpose it intends to. And the project of it being 40 units, it certainly does not fit the neighborhood in the area that I now call home. Thank you.
Okay.
Anthony Guida, 165 Water Street. I've been a friend of Jimmy King, the King family, for over 40 years. And this was their farm. Before Jimmy King, it was Rose and Louis King, and they worked it as a farm. Jimmy King planted peppers and Freddie Medeiros picked them. And I understand what that man was talking about as it being a farm. Jimmy's last days wanted to hear Byron Key's cow corn grow. And he did. However, because it's a act of God, no, it's not even an act of God. It had to be sold, but it wasn't Jimmy King's intention. That was his intention, was to keep it in the family. So I just want all the neighbors to know that. Okay? Now they know.
Hi, good evening, everyone. My name is Jorge Santos Jr. I live on Fort Fern Drive. I've been a Warren resident for now a little bit over 12 years. Originally from Bristol, always had kind of a passion. I'm homegrown, married my high school sweetheart, and we've been together now almost 25 years. And her idea was to always live in the East Bay, never leave. And I'm kind of anchored here now. So it's kind of my little background story. But there's a little bit more. This is not so much about this exact project, but more about why I'm here in Warren. Both my parents are immigrants from the Azores. They came here with very little on their back. And when they came here, all they ever did was rent. So from a personal experience, all I ever experienced was affordable housing, which was not really affordable housing. It was more of a poverty level, poverty line, an application process where I had to stay within limits, not necessarily myself, but my parents had to stay within limits in order to have a roof over their home. It was never theirs. They came here to this country to have a dream of owning a home, raising a family, and seeing them prosper. Well, they gave me that. I am now very successful in my own self. I have a family and I have 2 kids who attend school here in Warren. I bought my first home in Warren. My family, after many years here in this country, also bought their first home. So they were eventually able to get out of poverty and get their first home in Warren, Rhode Island, where after they lived in Bristol for many, many years, most of their life. I am all for affordable housing, but it's exactly what I want it to be, is affordable housing. Once these units go in here, they are rented. They're not owned by anyone. The pride that goes into the neighborhood, there's a lot of pride, which gives the value into that neighborhood, but also the town of Warren. Moving here to Warren was one of the greatest things. Buying my first home was the greatest thing, as I can see the next success story with my kids and future kids that live in the neighborhood. I want them to also be able to afford living in the town of Warren, see the town grow, but also stay in Warren. Most kids don't stay in the town that they grew up in. They'll go to school, they'll leave, they'll get a job elsewhere because there just isn't an affordable way to live in this town. They have to rent. As nice as it is to rent when it's inexpensive, it's a short-term plan. Nobody plans in their head to rent affordable housing for the rest of their life. It's a short-term plan. The cycle lifeline of those properties will come and go. People will come and go. It'll never be theirs. They don't own it. They don't chase the dream. They don't have that dream that they want to be able to own something and be part of it. This town has a great path ahead of them. I don't believe that these 40 units is the right direction. I think maybe more like something like a few homes would be better. Maybe 8 or 10 homes within that area would be great. A little bit of open space would also be great. Maybe a better path to the school. Child Street is a very busy street. It'd be nice if there was maybe a path to cut through or a small street to cut through just to get to the school. It's a great neighborhood, but I came here to be able to go ahead and own my first home, and I would love to see other people also own their first home, not just a temporary shelter. Thank you.
Okay, not seeing any hands up. I'll make a motion to close the public hearing.
Second.
Second, all in favor?
Aye.
All right, the public hearing is now closed. Would the applicant care to respond to?
Yes, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. A few comments on some of the comments from neighbors. No one likes change. We understand that. Every time I presented anything anywhere, whether it's Rhode Island, Massachusetts, Connecticut, no one likes change. And we all fear change. I mean, I'm a creature of habit. I'm sure we all are. It's giving people a home versus not having a home is our goal. East Bay Community Development Corporation is a nonprofit housing developer. They're not a for-profit. They own, they manage, they maintain, and as I said, every 15 years we refinance it. There was one comment that someone said that after a few years it can become Section 8. I don't know what that means, but this has to remain affordable for at least 30 years. And when we refinance in 15 years, Rhode Island Housing puts another 30-year mortgage on it. So our goal, and we would certainly be willing to accept the condition that it stay affordable for in perpetuity, because that's our goal, that's our mission. We do pay taxes. We pay 8% of the effective gross income of taxes, as is state law, as in any development of affordable housing that is rental, through the low-income housing tax credit program with deed restrictions does. The drainage issue that someone brought up would be addressed at preliminary when our full drainage design is completed, and both CRMC and DEM have to weigh in on that. And without their approval, we can't move forward. So no matter what happens here, we still have to satisfy all those state agencies. That has to happen. Someone had raised a point of this being a farm and what Mr. King would have wanted. Had Mr. King really wanted that, he would have put a deed restriction when he sold it. This is a piece of property that is no longer owned by that family, nor the family that came after him, or nor the family that came after him. We own it as the East Bay Community Development Corporation, a nonprofit. And there were no deed restrictions placed on the property at that point. If you looked at the Sanborn maps for this entire area, when you speak of farms, every person that spoke here lived on property that was formerly a farm. And I come across this so often in many communities, being the salesman that I am, that everyone thinks that I've got mine, but I don't remember what happened before me. And they were all farms. So I'd just like to point that out. Another question was raised over people being stuck and being a poverty trap. That is never the case. In anything we build, the low-income housing tax credit program requires that once a person is living there, they can remain as long as they'd like, as long as they're income qualified when they move in. We can't kick them out. We're not in the business of kicking people out of homes. We're in the business of providing homes for people. So that's not true. East Bay Community Development Corporation does both homeownership and rental, and provides opportunities for people at all levels of income within the affordable, which can go up to 120% of median. This particular development goes up to 60% of median income under the low-income housing tax credit program. I think I've addressed all of the concerns that are addressable. With that, I can take any questions that you have.
Resident priority.
So this comes up in almost every development, that we always start marketing locally. And the need is so great in Warren that we would expect that the vast majority, like our other developments, would come from the community. We can't violate fair housing laws, but we can market locally first.
So fair housing laws
We can't preclude someone, just like anyone selling their home can't say, you don't live in Warren, you can't buy my house. We say the same thing in a rental property. It's exactly the same thing. That's fair housing violation.
You mentioned that you're not able to evict someone. You mentioned that you're not able to evict a tenant once they no longer qualify under the income guidelines. Do they continue to pay the affordable rent rate, or do you increase rent accordingly, proportionally?
So that's a very good question. So the Section 8 program is totally different than the low-income housing tax credit program. The Section 8 program establishes fair market rent. And that program says that a person pays 30% of their income. And once their income reaches enough to support the entire fair market rent, then it fluctuates. Under the low-income housing tax credit program, they pay the same whether they're at whatever level they're at. So if there are a 50% person, they would pay that rent in the apartment that they're living in.
So it depends on what program they come in under?
It depends on how the development is financed.
And yours is not.
This is low-income housing tax
It
credit.
is the low income.
Correct.
housing, so that you gave us a comparison of the two, but
Correct.
the second.
This is low-income housing tax credits.
Meaning that their rent will not change as they make more income.
Yes, it's rare that someone over income stays because there are other opportunities for people that are over income once they've gotten to that point. However, we're not allowed to kick them out, nor would we.
So that's, you know what I mean, that's one of the things that's been a concern to me is your company has a wait list of 2 years, but we have no idea how many people are in these or could be in the development that really shouldn't be while, you know, taking those units from folks who need it. You're saying you're not allowed to kick them out by law. Okay, that's one thing, but if you could, would you, or would you raise the rent? I guess it doesn't matter.
So we're not allowed to. Yeah, and
But
our goal is to provide housing.
I understand, but when there's a need and someone that's taking up a space that can afford something else, seems to me it's time for them to move on. But
It sounds like you're making the argument for us to build 80 units here.
so if you're saying you can't by law, that's the answer to the question.
Yeah, we can.
Okay.
Any other questions concerning?
I have a couple more questions. So actually, I went and looked at Briarwood and Farmer Point, and it's unusual that we actually get to see in advance something that's to be built. Ordinarily, we're sort of have renderings and drawings and whatever. And quite frankly, I was impressed with the layout and the maintenance, and I thought it was a nice looking, both of them were nice looking communities. And so,
Thank you. We're very proud of them. And in fact, so proud that we have the exact same development team. We have the same architect, same engineer, much younger lawyer, but that's our mission, is to provide good, safe and decent affordable housing.
have you had, what are the problems you've seen at Briarwood or
Sweetbriar?
Farmer Point?
Sweetbriar. But so the same problems we see in any property management situation. There are always landlord-tenant issues sometimes where someone doesn't want to pay their rent. We have to force them out, evict them, because if they don't pay their rent, they do have to go. Very typical relationships like that. Other than that, nothing.
Thank you.
I had a couple other questions. I don't want to monopolize. Couple questions. When you came back and you were replying to the public comment, you were talking about that you do pay taxes. There was a question asked about the tax burden that would be brought about by the new units. So I presume you probably have a number of what the tax base that would be added to the coffers of the town of Warren from?
I do not know that number. I can get that number for you, but I do not know that number. But yes, we do pay taxes.
Based on,
8% of effective gross income,
So
which is state law.
I can't understand the words you're saying. 8% of what?
Effective gross income?
8% of effective gross income. So does that mean that it's like just I'm an engineer, so I'm just trying to do
Okay.
some head math. What does that mean?
So,
Is it like a penny on the 8 cents on a dollar of what a normal tax?
So
base would
annually-
be from that?
no, it actually is very helpful that you're an engineer. Now I can understand what your line of thinking is. So, if we have to annually give a certified payroll to the tax assessor, and we do this in Barrington, we do this everywhere we work, in Bristol, and in many of my other clients throughout the state. So in January, we provide a rent roll from the previous year, which says what the rent was, gross rent for that entire year. And then we're taxed at 8% of that number.
Okay, so can't do the math that quickly, but for a place like one of the equivalent ones that you were talking about, Palmer Point or
I don't know those numbers, but I can certainly get them to you. I'm not on the management side, so that's a fiscal person within the office, but that's state law. So any development under the low-income housing tax credit pays exactly what we pay. So
Okay.
it's not a Warren thing, it's a state law thing.
I think that information would be interesting, based on the questions asked. Question about, you identifying that a full drainage study would need to be performed and you need to get concurrence from the DEM and things. I'll ask this very bluntly. The comprehensive permit ties all sorts of committees' hands. Is the DEM's gonna have to
No,
agree with
No.
whatever is said in the same way that planning boards are?
no, we have to meet DEM and CRMC requirements, regardless.
So you can't put in for waivers and
Correct.
do whatever.
No waivers from any of the environmental issues.
What percentage of the residents in Barrington, are there a lot of children in those facilities at Sweetbriar?
Again, I'm not on the management side, but I can certainly get you that answer.
I had a few more questions, two more questions. Several members of the board asked about the density. A number of folks talked about density. You said, you seemed pretty dismissive very quickly as someone threw out 25 and you said it's infeasible. The only pro forma data that I have, what it seems like I'm being asked for is to just take that on faith. And I know that you're a professional at what you do, and so I'm not questioning that.
Sure.
But I don't have anything to actually base that evidence on as I weigh the things that are being talked about for like the least relief necessary.
Yeah.
So I guess that's a question that I have in my mind. Additionally, in thinking about the financial feasibility, I thought I heard you say a couple minutes ago that within your constituency, there's both full rental and there's ownership paths. A number of people have talked about the desire they love owning in their house. What are the numbers of an affordable thing that is more of an ownership than a rental? All those numbers are things that I think would be helpful data in terms of weighing this decision based on the feedback from.
So the only way I can answer that question, because I think there are probably, I could go on for an hour and a half on that one question. Every one of the developments that we do are 100% affordable in East Bay Community Development Corporation. And in each case, they require substantial subsidy from Rhode Island Housing, the state, other funding agencies, federal sources, grant funds, et cetera. And what makes it infeasible is there's a per unit cost that Rhode Island Housing has sort of deemed competitive and not. And I think as I said, there were probably going to be $250 million in applications for $90 million in projects. So if it were, say, knocked down to 25 units, that would not compete well because the per unit cost would be well over $500,000 and it would never get funded, which makes it infeasible. So and the state law reads that if it's approved with a condition that makes it infeasible or denied, it's virtually the same thing. It would be appealed to the courts at that point. So those are the same. And a home ownership versus rental,
Sorry, what's the same? I missed that last point.
denial or an appeal, an approval with a condition of, say, 25 units, which was, I think, mentioned by Mr. Massey, that makes it infeasible, or any number that makes it infeasible, is the same as a denial. So those are the same. In terms of,
I don't necessarily agree with that statement. However, he is correct in saying that obviously if this board denies it, it can be appealed. In addition, any condition can be appealed by the applicant.
yeah,
So, an approval based on a reduction to, let's say, 25 units. There could be an appeal to the condition. But it would
Correct.
still have gone through the master plan process. It would still be a live project.
It would be, correct. We just had a condition, if they think it makes the project infeasible, certainly they have the right to appeal within 20 days. And Mr. Chair, while I have the mic, Rhode Island General Law 452344D, the entire lot is what is used to calculate density.
Okay.
Go back to it.
So again, that gets us back then to the Sweetbriar and Palmer Point, which were much larger. And so that is taken into consideration. So again, this is, my sticking point on this. I understand that affordable housing can be rental. The days of everybody owns a house.
He was just gonna answer one last thing.
Okay,
That
well, what was that?
about the ownership, you were gonna address my question about ownership versus rental?
yeah, we do both. The greatest need right now is for rental housing throughout the country, not only the state.
So I guess what my question is it seems like it would be a fundamentally different calculation between the feasibility of the per unit cost if they were rental units full-time or they were being sold for ownership, no?
So I think that you will see on the hearing that's going to follow us, that there's a for-profit developer coming in with a market rate and an affordable component, because that's the only way that can make that development feasible, is to have some market rate mixed in. And my early statement of by allowing 25%, that doesn't help the town at all. You're barely treading water.
I think Matt correct me if I'm wrong, but I think you were saying, could this be all affordable housing as opposed to all affordable rentals? Is that
Yes.
what you were asking?
Yes, wouldn't that be?
Could this be homeownership versus, so there are two competing things there. So as I said, that we rely on subsidy from Rhode Island Housing and the federal government, and in order to make the projects buildable. And part of that is the available funding currently. And the vast majority of funding currently is available for rental housing throughout the state and the country.
So it's not necessarily that it's infeasible from affordable housing. It's that the money that you'd be going after for this, the pot that is available right now is rental based.
Which makes it infeasible because we wouldn't get funded for home ownership if this were all home ownership. That's infeasible. We couldn't,
Right, I'm just trying to, and I will give the floor back to Fred. I'm trying
Yeah.
to, there's a finance thing, and then there's in 6 years, there could be a different pot of money that the government has made available, and now it's homeownership. I'm trying to pull out the financial solvency of it one way or another.
Right.
And it sounds like what you're coming back with is the funding that's available right now makes it infeasible. I'm trying to get to the underlying question of the financial feasibility of that homeownership, regardless of whether the funding is available or not.
So any development that's 100% affordable requires a great deal of subsidy.
Roger.
And without that subsidy, it's infeasible. So whether, if your condition to make were to say that this had to be home ownership, that would, in our mind, make it infeasible.
Based on the funding that's available at present. Thank you.
Yes.
Okay,
Can I raise a question?
Sure.
So the issues before the planning board tonight is essentially you've got an approval without condition, an approval with condition, continuation, or disapproval. If they were to approve with a condition of reducing the number of units, so it's less dense, you said at 25, it would be infeasible. And this may be more a question for your attorney, and that is if there's an appeal of such a approval with condition, does that keep the project alive for purposes of tax credits that you have a deadline of January 16th to submit or not? And then further, just to add misery to the question, if they deny the project and you decide to appeal it, is it still alive for purposes of tax?
So in both of those cases, it would not be going in the January 16th round because anything under 40 units is infeasible, in our opinion.
So to clarify, you said anything less than 40 units. So from your perspective, there's no number of units that could be reduced from this project that would make this feasible from CDC's standpoint.
Yes.
Thank you.
If I could have 1 second with the engineer.
sure.
If you are still concerned about setbacks, Andy Glines from Fuss and O'Neill would be happy to address any of those waivers that we're seeking regarding those setbacks.
You know, the setback is not as much of a concern, certainly to me, as the density. It's clearly a factor of exponentially greater density. And, you know, I want to frame this by saying rental housing is affordable. I mean, I lived in an apartment. My grandparents, who were immigrants, they lived in an apartment. I mean, the home ownership thing is, you know, I'm the baby boom generation. Yeah, I've had a number of houses that I built up, but that may not be the way that things go in America with an increasing population. And so affordable rentals are valuable and should not
55
be,
plus, 55 plus.
should not
I'd like
be, you know, ignored as a means by which we can help people, you know, in this town and in the surrounding area. That said, where is the best place for this level of intense development, intensely dense development? And to put it in the middle of neighborhoods where folks were operating on the basis of this is our zoning and this is how it works. I mean, the farmland in Warren is all designated R40. It's all, you know, acre zoning. So that could have conceivably 3 houses, 4 houses. That's, you know, 12 people, 14 people, 15 people. The difference is 15 people to 100. I mean, it's a significant number, and it pains me to think that there isn't some way of reducing this to still make it feasible. If you're not building as many units, you're reducing your expense. So as a consequence, couldn't that offset from a pro forma basis the amount of money that you need? I mean, I know the infrastructure is kind of set, but given that, it feels like there's no room for compromise, and I just don't personally feel comfortable with it.
We as an organization, and having been doing this for 30 years, there are for-profit developers that come into a board in a town and say, I'm going to ask for 1,000 units because I know I'm going to get cut down to 500. We never do that. We propose a very carefully thought out plan that we think can work, because we have to market these as well. We own them, we manage them, we maintain them forever. That is our goal, that is our mission. And we put as many people in houses, in apartments, in houses as we can, because most of them don't have an option right now. So from a marketing standpoint, we need to be able to market these. And so we never go in, when you say compromise, we never enter the process with, okay, we can throw away X%. We just don't do that. We just provide what we think is a really good development. And then it either sinks or swims on its merits.
Okay. I mean, fair enough. I mean, clearly, this is the first time in my 20 years on this board that we've ever had somebody come in and not have some room for movement.
Yeah.
But also, I think from a marketing standpoint, it's important to look at location and size of the town. You know, how much can the town absorb, and how much can that area, the environment, the existing environment, which is a sense of place that all these folks have spoken have.
For sure.
And to take a neighborhood, you know, this on Medicom, in the vision for market to Medicom, would work very well. It would be within the construct of a revitalized area. But here, what it feels like is we're shoehorning in, and I don't mean that, you know, well, I do. It's 40 units of over 100 people into a very small area compared to the surrounding residents.
If you don't mind, Mr. Adaman from
Sure.
the architecture firm would like to.
Well, Paul Ackerman, architect. Mr. Chair, I'm listening to the comment about density, and I just like to offer sort of the experience that anyone that's been at Sweetbriar and Palmer Point that we've talked about tonight multiple times, personal experiences. Mr. Gerhard went, experienced that space, the architecture, the parking, the circulation, and how well those are maintained by East Bay CDC. This here, although the numbers may indicate 40 units as super dense, the care that we've taken, if you look at the architecture we presented in your packets, are very residential in scale. They're 2 stories in height. They are front porches that really effectively create a single family feel. They invite presence and community to sit on your front porch, talk to your neighbors, interact with passersby. They're not right on the street. We have an integrated sidewalk around the neighborhood. So there is a distance between the front porches and the street. The parking is distributed as parallel and on street as a buffer between the buildings and the street. So we've taken every care that we did at Sweetbriar and Palmer Point to replicate and use those strategies to make this feel like a single family duplex neighborhood. These are all 1 and 2 family townhouse style. They're not apartment buildings. They are townhouses, small townhouses with duplexes and 3 single family units attached. And that is very critical to think about the feeling and the neighborhood that we are proposing. And so if people liked and have a good feeling about Palmer Point and Sweetbriar, I hope you have the faith that we would do the same here.
Thank you. Thank you. I mean, it's a beautifully designed piece. I mean, at first blush, it's a winner. You look at it and you say, this is, you know, and hats off to you for the work that you've done on it, and to the intention of providing this. The question is this the right place for that level of density? Does it create a pocket essentially in the middle of a neighborhood?
So if you were to do the math and it were a single family development under the underlying zoning in the nearby R10, you would have virtually the same number of people potentially, because you could have up more than 20 houses.
More than 20 houses?
Yep. At 4.5 acres, an R10.
Not an
Well, I don't,
It's an R40.
it's an R40.
It is, and we would argue it's spot zoned at R40 because everything around it is R10.
Well, again, I'm not sure that, you know, I don't know if you can argue spot zoning. I mean, it is what it is at this point. And,
Correct. So not 40.
It's an R40. It's not an
I mean,
R10.
yeah.
Yeah,
So
and we would come for you even if it were single family or if it were a comprehensive permit for home ownership, we would still come under the comprehensive permit process.
I mean, the thing that frightens me about this whole comprehensive permit process is that we've had some very bad proposals come before.
You have.
And none of them, except this one, would move the needle on affordable housing. And you're all well-intentioned and you've done a beautiful job with it. The question is, you know, is that enough to say that this, as it stands, with that many houses, makes sense? I mean, again, I'd ask other members so that, you know, this isn't my decision alone. This is.
Well, but it is what it is, you know, this is their proposal. And if we turn it down, we sacrifice 40 affordable units. And we all know what a priority that is and how difficult these projects are to organize and develop. None of the others have moved the needle. This moves the needle. And as a consequence, you know, I think we have to sort of take, the lot is what it is. You might wish that there were fewer units, but the testimony is that that will not prevail with the financing and with the feasibility. So, you know, the choice is the board. You want to foster affordable housing in Warren or not?
Well,
I just don't think that, you know, I'm not saying that I'm necessarily for or against this at this juncture, but I don't think that the decision is that you are opposed to affordable housing.
That's what I'm saying.
Are opposed to this.
Good,
You know, so I think that you can have reasonable objections and, you know, preferences on different locations and different scopes. One of my concerns is something that the chair alluded to, is that as far as these kind of projects are concerned, and these projects are projects that, contrary to what someone was suggesting earlier, these are not projects that are dictated by town council or by the laws in this community. In fact, these are rules that are undermine, that are drafted specifically to undermine the ability of town council to pass laws that reflect the interest of the members of the community. So we are very much handcuffed in what we are capable of doing as far as protecting the interests and the wishes of the town. But that said, as far as these kind of projects that I've seen, this one, it looks good. I mean, it's as far as the aesthetics, the design compared to some of the others that I've seen. I do have issues with density, and I think that there are some things that we could look at as far as the variances, because I have a hard time feeling very palatable when a whole list of variances, the variances that are known matters that the town has demonstrated are priorities to the town, that the developers are saying that we just don't want to do. And but as far as our legal ability to do that is somewhat handcuffed by this type of legislation. So.
Yeah, and I think what's important to realize here is that should the board deny this, and I'm not saying that that's where we're going, an appeal, Ben, this, like if we're the board to deny this, it would go to the Superior Court. Decision in favor of this would mean that this would be allowed as it is presented.
They can approve, they can deny, they can remand, meaning go back to the board for further evidence or deliberations. So they have a couple different options there.
Okay. Any thoughts here?
Does the conditions recommended by the TRC, are you in agreement with those conditions?
There's only one, I believe, that we are not in agreement with, which is the off-site improvement, because we just can't fund any of that. I don't know what.
It's not, sorry. Sorry, Mr. Vice Chair. It's an off-site development that has nothing to do with the actual on-site development piece itself.
Remember which number it is that you're
I
referring to?
believe it's 3C. Sorry, 3C. It's the off-site gate that's not attached to the development in any way. It's in another neighborhood.
So you're saying it's sort of a misplaced recommendation?
I don't know if it's a misplaced recommendation. I think just the condition came out of TRC. I had a number of conversations. I think there's already a meeting of the minds of the experts as to its applicability to the development.
Oh, offsite improvements at the end.
Talked about bollards, or was that the one?
I believe there's a gate off of another street that's not adjacent to or abutting our development.
That goes into, I believe, the soccer field.
I
Is
believe
that
so,
the-
yeah.
That then in turn leads to the Picayune Middle School.
Yeah, and it has nothing, it doesn't touch or abut any of our property line.
Well, it's up to the town council, which, you know, had, as that previous woman who testified indicated, the town council has made promises regarding the use of that field and parking and access to it. So that,
I understand, but not.
no,
yeah,
it's not your issue.
Yeah,
Yeah, no, I get that for sure. So that, you know, I was at the TRC, so that makes sense to me. I mean, it wasn't a reasonable.
Yeah.
You know, we thought that the recommendation of that was going to be that the town council do something about that,
right.
because it was just a discussion. That's the only one.
I tend to agree with the chair. I just wanted to echo some sentiments regarding, there's been a lot of discussion about rent versus ownership. I'm fine with it being rentals. I don't know where the sentiment comes from that people don't want to rent. That doesn't make any sense to me. Plenty of people choose to rent on purpose. I used to be a renter for 6 years in Warren before I bought the house that I live in. Renting was great. There's a lot of benefits to renting. I like being a homeowner, but there's some days when there's a leaky faucet upstairs and I can't call my landlord and say, hey, fix it. You know, the squirrels got in the roof last year, $1,500, the stupid things cost me. Yeah, you know, I mean, there's a big demand for rental units and that's fine. I think that's totally fine. It is more dense than I would hope to see. It's a busy area. There's gonna be an additional traffic burden in a town that already has some traffic burdens. So I'm curious to know what the impact of that will look like. I wish it wasn't the case that there seems to be this impediment in the law that lets people stay in an affordable situation when they shouldn't be anymore. Like it or not, other people need the space, but that's an argument for a different day. I don't have any more questions.
Anything, Matt?
I think I've already aired most of my thoughts. I am unable to absorb a TRC 18-page report that's handed to me at the beginning of the meeting, so I'm not sure what.
For the most part, it was pretty straightforward. I mean, I will tell you that the TRC, with the issues of runoff handled by DEM and CRMC, snow removal handled by the Department of Public Works, curbing, sewer, would be
Trash was the other big issue.
trash pickup. Those things were all addressed in the TRC by the staff or the applicant in terms to the satisfaction of those members of the technical review committee. So, I mean, that's the short form of the TRC. Really, this whole issue of density never came up with the TRC, nor in fact is it necessarily their business. The technical review committee is really aimed at looking at the technical aspects, the fire department. Can you get a fire truck in here? You know, when you look at the approving or denying this application, it ticks more boxes on approving than it does denying. But this issue of density is a real sticking point. And I don't know, I mean, as good as it looks, that's a lot of people to have in an area that would ordinarily have 4 houses. I mean, you know, the difference is you could get some people in there who don't want you anywhere near their houses. You know, I mean, it's not like there's some white knight out there who's going to come in and buy this piece of land and put in nice houses and have the deer walking through them. I can tell you that piece of land is going to go away one way or another, particularly in this market. But and it pains me that that the density just doesn't, that there's no movement.
I guess one other comment I would make is that our interchange earlier about me trying to parse the difference between the financial solvency of a given density of rentership versus ownership, and what funding is available right now versus what funding is not available. While I understood those points, those salient points, I still don't have our engagement. We don't need to engage further on it because I don't think you have the numbers, but I still don't understand if money were available, if the for the ownership route, whether the financial solvency that hasn't been answered to my desire, but I don't think.
But we're not
engage.
proposing a home ownership development here.
Yeah, no, I get it.
I'm concerned about the fact that we're being presented with a kind of brinkmanship situation here because I would not want you to lose your funding. On the other hand, in good conscience, I at least don't feel like the density is acceptable, as it stands. One possibility is the planner noted is to approve this because it does check the boxes, but with the condition that the density be reduced to a proportion equal to that of Palmer Point and Sweetbriar, which would probably be in the neighborhood of 25 to 30 units. It's not a great solution either way necessarily, but I feel like it is at least acknowledging the fact that you've got a good plan that's really well designed, but that this is not necessarily the plot of land that it best fits in.
And 30 units is not feasible from our perspective.
Right. Again, though, it's can you take out a house? I mean, when you remove houses, doesn't that impact your money? Is it because the number of houses in terms of?
There are many costs that are constant. The roadway doesn't change whether I have 5 or 40. A lot of the soft costs are the same. And so Rhode Island Housing looks at it from a total development cost per unit basis. And the denser, the lower the cost per unit. So even though the total cost would come down, the per unit cost goes up. And that's why I said in the beginning of the presentation that 50 units is really Rhode Island Housing's sweet spot. They don't like to fund anything under 50 units today.
And that would be absurd.
Right.
See, and this
Which is why we didn't
kind of
propose it.
This is kind of the problem here, that we keep being handed this stuff by the legislature or by Rhode Island Housing, as acting on the behest of the legislature, that puts us in an untenable position. 50 being the sweet spot, 50 for 4.5 acres. I mean, when does it end?
We didn't believe 50 was the right number for this lot, which is why we came in with 40, because we feel that it is the right number. However, you have to understand that we have to compete against all the other applicants.
Yeah, no, I get it.
And when we go to Rhode Island Housing for funding, and that's really where the rubber hits the road. And if it never can get funded, it's infeasible, can't be built.
Well, anything else?
Motion?
I don't think I have anything else.
Fred, do you want a motion?
Sure.
I'll move that we approve the master plan.
I'll second that on the condition that it meet the TRC conditions -3C and a satisfactory traffic study that would occur later. Anyone in favor of the motion to approve as with the condition that I just?
Yeah, that's okay.
Yeah.
Certainly.
Anyone? Hands? Yays? Nays?
I'm not sure.
What is the question on?
Well,
Not a
the
question.
question is to approve, the
I get
motion is
that.
to approve with the conditions established by the TRC
And a traffic study.
in a traffic study.
So, Mr. Chair, so now you have a motion, we got a second, I would just take a roll call vote going down.
Matt?
Nay.
Brett?
Aye.
Fred, no.
No.
Aye.
No.
This is, nobody wins here.
Mr. Chair, any other motions by this board?
I would make a motion to approve with conditions, the condition being a reduction of the units to that to the same proportion as evidenced by Palmer Point and Sweetbriar.
Is there a second one?
I second that.
Matt?
I would
Sorry, Matt, I just want to make sure that it also includes all the conditions.
Yes, yes, it-
Yeah, oh, I'm sorry, all the conditions of the TRC.
Can you say it again? It's
It would be
approval of the
an
plan.
approval of the application with a reduction in the density to the same percentage that we saw for the acreage allowed in Sweetbriar and in Palmer Point, which would be subject to discussion, but I mean, at this point, I think we're talking about 25 units within that.
Can you start at the other end?
I'm sorry, what?
Can you start at the other end? I'm always the first.
Oh, sure.
Killing me.
Yes.
Mike?
Yes.
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 Nay.
I can go back.
Yes.
Okay, so that passes. Approval and I think that it would be what we want to put into that decision is the fact that the proposed development we feel is not currently in compliance with the standards and the precisions of the municipality's zoning ordinance and subdivision regulations, or where expressly waived local concerns that have been affected. So that would be the basis for our conditions.
And Mr. Chair, it's also based on the entire record, application, testimony, correct?
Anything else? So the motion passed.
Thank you very much.
Thanks.
I cut you 6 lines. Body bright.
Yeah.
You have to tell
Yeah, I'm sorry.
employment tax goes to the employment tax goes to the state. They're not profit, they don't pay property tax. He knows that.
Yeah. There were 5 minutes. Street.
Break's over.
So, if you could take your seats or wander off, your choice. Again, just a reminder, I'm sure not everybody who is here now was here before, but we do have a, public hearing procedure and rules. We're going to have the applicant, present the revised plan. We're hoping in under 30 minutes. Yes, good. Then the board will ask the town staff if there's any questions. The board will ask some questions, and then we'll open it up to the public meeting. Now, in this case, we've gone over this particular proposal a lot. So we've heard about a number of the concerns. For example, the trees, that's on record. We know that there are people who are concerned about the trees, but that's not what this meeting is about. What you can comment on is the revised plan in front of us. You're asked to speak only 3 to 5 minutes, hoping to get out of here before, daybreak. We would like to, there's been a continuance for a number of times by the applicant on this matter, and I think we're at the end of our rope on that one. Once people, when you come up, state your name, your address, and then speak for 3 to 5 minutes, preferably 3. And don't say the same thing that somebody said just before you, or rehash something that had to do with the overall plan on this. So take it away.
Good evening, Mr. Chair, members of the board. Congratulations on your last hearing. You did an excellent job. We are now, well, you did. I've been through this many, many times, as many of you know. I'm now here with Mr. Lannon and Mr. Loro, who own Liberty Street School. They bought it. They've listened to you. You've seen a greatly reduced project here. John and I were discussing it. Ironically, tonight, we meet the 1.5 parking spaces at a point in time when the law says we only need 1. But we have eliminated that variance request. We have furthermore increased the size of the parking spaces. We reduced the number of units. We've gone down from an original size of the back building of 18 units to 12 units. Reduced the original size from 6,000 square feet to slightly less than 4,000 square feet. The project now is manageable. They can handle it. I look at what I've seen in terms of comments. The comment by the Ned Connors, the preservation consultant or specialist, talked about the history of the school and the privies in the back corners. Well, we're clearly not proposing privies in the back corner. But he didn't mention the cupola that we are maintaining, because if he did mention it, you have to acknowledge that we're doing something we don't have to do. We are maintaining historic cupola on the structure. The cupola was originally there to provide ventilation and exercise. This is going to be an HVAC building. It's going to be mini splits. We don't need that. We're preserving the quality of it. We're eliminating the fire escapes by sprinkling the building. So we're bringing and restoring a lot of historic quality of it. Mr. Lannon revealed to me tonight that he spent $5,000 on the landscape architect, giving you the indication of the plantings and such that he's going to be doing. That's just soft cost. All that accomplished was showing you the commitment that is being made. We have even as late as today had communication from the East Bay Community Action Program. Their board is talking about our discussions. One of the things that we're proposing, and Mr. Lannon will explain, is placing a new linden tree on their corner of their property to improve the street front. I looked at an article from a Projo. The housing secretary, Steve Pryor, stated that Rhode Island continues to build the fewest number of new units by population in the entire country. And I couldn't help but overhear the commentary from the prior application that you're sentencing these people to be renters. Well, some people will always be renters. We know that. We're building condominium units that will be able to be purchased at affordable levels. Anyone with the ability to read the Providence Journal reads them and sees that the margin and the tightness of the affordable units is very close. So the developer has to have market rate units to be able to carry those and develop those. If you talk to Ron Luro, who is actually the person who's going to be building these buildings, he'll tell you, I lose money on every affordable unit I build because I can't get what the materials cost. Toilets cost the same amount in a market unit and an affordable unit. Sinks, garbage disposals, dishwashers, all that's the same price. So this is a very reasonable application. We came in strong because we felt it fit. We were disagreed with. It's been listened to very thoroughly. We have given you a bullet point list of the adjustments that have been made. I think Mr. Lannon is more qualified to tell you and answer your questions as to the commitments they've made to make this project work. This project works in this site. This building has been derelict, functionally derelict, even when it was the site for the theater as a construction site for their sets and such. They did nothing to improve the site. It was just a factory for them. They did not care about the building. Nobody cared about the building. Nobody stepped forward in the 30, 40 years that it's been sitting there. Joe Brito years ago tried to make this into a residential facility and got shot down. These guys have made the commitment to make this a nice, beautiful building. They need to have sufficient facility to be able to do it economically. There are new laws and works that we are not going to look at right now. This is a very good application. I think Mr. Lannon's trying, and you asked me to be 30 minutes. Lawyers aren't usually shut down that quickly, but I am because he's that good and this project is that good. Mr. Lannon.
Thank you.
Thank you, Bruce. Happy New Year. It's a new year. Thank you all. I serve on some boards in Bristol and some commissions. I want to just express my gratitude. I don't think everybody in the audience realizes what you guys do. You all have a home life, so I will be brief. We do have the project memorized. We all know the drill. I gave you a narrative as a supplemental before this meeting, so I wouldn't even have to talk half as much as I was going to talk, which wasn't going to be much anyway. Basically, we reduced the back building. It's approximately the same size as the front building. We took 18 units, made them into 12. The original size when we first walked in was 6,000 square feet. We're down to 3,960. I gave you a little narrative. It's a foot and a quarter shorter. It's a foot narrower, 6 feet longer. So just to show you where it was, the parking I'm pretty proud of. We made the 1.5. It's a new year. Ironically, this is I guess as of yesterday, we didn't need that, but we wanted to do that. We applied last year. So you were right, Brett, and we're on board with that. So we made the 1.5 per unit and we were worried about parallel parking. I did something. I eliminated one spot along that western property line. We gave an additional planter, which I'll get to in a minute, but I took the rest of that space and each spot is now 9 by 19 instead of 9 by 18. It's another foot. It's an attempt just to make it a little bit more palatable. Okay, again, they're condos. People are going to look, and if they don't like the idea, they're not going to buy one. We're not forcing them in there, and there's not as many. So we're down to a lot less units. You saw the pro forma. Cards are on the table. This is all dictated by math. If I could cut it in half again, I would. There's something math here. You see what the math is. We disclosed it to you. I'm an estimator, so is Ronnie. We're from here. You guys know us a little bit, I would think, anyway. So it represents as far as we can go under this application. And we hope you like it. I did hire a landscape architect. You didn't have to tell him how much it was. It was what we wanted to do. We're trying to show you what we can do, and we did green it up. That's Diane Soule. She's noted. She's done a lot of work at the colleges. She's done all my subdivisions in Bristol. We eliminated 2 of the spots out front. We saw a note from Herb, one of his original notes about doing the street over to it. Didn't really come up at TRC, but we'll do the sidewalk and the curbing, ADA handicap ramps. It'll all be compliant right across the front.
Then in eliminating the two of the front spots in front of the building, we now have 3 on each side. So we've got a planting bed along the front, the entire front, other than the 2 entries. That'll all be curbing, by the way. That won't be like Cape Cod berm or anything. The sidewalk, we narrowed it a little bit, but in doing so, we gained planting on both sides of the sidewalk. And then we have planting in front of that building coming out. It's approximately 4 feet. And it's going to come around both sides of that building, go all the way down. It's going to skip over a staircase or a bulkhead, but it's going to go down both sides, approximately 4 feet off the building, and wrap around the back. When we shrunk the front building, we kept it heading it to the east, so to speak. We did gain 5 spots there, which is how we made the 1.5. But we kept the sidewalk and we turned that sidewalk section into another planting bed along the back. And we've added some green space along the back fence line. There was one note from just one of the neighbors. We are keeping that green. We are not required to make that into a paved surface for fire apparatus, something like that. That 10-foot corridor in the back will indeed be green. We're not trying to show you something and then like bait and switch. It's going to be green. We're still amenable to buying trees for the neighbors. No, I haven't met with everybody. It's just been a lot going on. I have a project in Tiverton. It was the holidays. I'm not making excuses. We're still willing to sit with everybody. So I covered landscaping, parking, new building, and so we don't need a parking variance anymore for parking spots, and the dimensional relief has been reduced from 26.9 to 16.8. Bruce made me promise to mention that, so I did put it in here. We gave you a new cover sheet, the title sheet on the, it just gives you, it's the corrected version of the title sheet. So how do they do? Questions?
Yeah, I mean, we greatly appreciate the fact that you have listened all along, and it's been a long, strange trip, but, you know.
It's fine. You guys have been good.
You've been responsive. Couple of concerns that I have, and I think that these could be handled as conditions of a master plan approval. There are concerns about the fact that that back building is still 3 stories tall, and it is, it's a presence. And essentially what you're telling me, and I telling us, and we hear you, is that we're done. It's either this or, deny it and we'll see in court. The outside facade of that building, the second building, I'd like to talk about that. Now, generally, the planning board doesn't always get into these, the issues of what a building looks like, what the materials are, the windows and that kind of thing. But I think, in fairness to your neighbors, I think that's something that work could be done on that. I'd like to spend some time thinking about what that back building could look like in terms of, the siding, the windows. There are some 3-bedroom apartments that you've got now. I'm a little concerned about that as well, because I saw this when you first came in. You never really, said, well, this is who this is for. But in my mind, I was thinking, couples and folks who are starting off. You get into 3 bedrooms, it's a different animal. And the fact that the bedrooms are 10 by 9, that's really small for a bedroom. I think one of the conditions that I would be looking at was, make them 2-bedroom and give them, better space. I don't know that, I don't know if marketing it as a 3-bedroom, as you said, people will come into the place, but, the parking is a concern there. As soon as you go to a 3rd bedroom, it's a different kind of unit. But again, as you've said, it's part of the negotiation, we're looking for. And the third thing is landscaping. You've done a, good job with that. But we'd want to have a condition, and this is stuff that can go on during the preliminary plan. Those kinds of alteration. We're not talking about major alterations here. This is cosmetic, but it's extremely important. You know, if you're saying that, you know, the thing has got to be 3 stories, is there a way that you can make it palatable to your neighbors? And I think this is where the neighbors can play a role, in terms of what this thing could look like. So, any other concerns, comments? Questions?
How many 3-bedroom units are planned?
I'm sorry, Brett.
How many 3-bedroom units are planned?
So there's 6. The and just so we're clear, it's just it was just an exercise in retail. When we gave up 6 of the 18 units, I'm like, how are we going to get some of that back? So some of it was gotten back by the 6 units becoming 3 bedrooms. There might be a little negotiation there. Maybe some of them get back to 2 bedrooms, and maybe we're allowed to keep some of them. It's an exercise in retail. We weren't trying to like sneak one back in.
I get it.
I'm just trying to make the math work.
I'm also looking at it as, you know, if I were buying it, you know, like,
Right.
you know,
Yeah, I'm just.
how do I roll over? You know?
I'm just asking, I guess my question was, so you adjusted the number of bedrooms upward to account for the reduction in the number of units, and you did that because you've determined that they'll sell, that's the cost you need, you'll be able to sell a 3-bedroom unit for more money.
The retail was important, obviously, when you got down to a certain number, and there is a demand for some of those.
Yeah.
And we didn't have it originally in the plan, but I was just trying to wait. I actually brought it back to all 2 bedrooms, and I looked at the retail number. I'm like, that, I can't go that far. Like, how can I make some of it back? That was all. We took one of the 2 bedrooms in the front building. You guys probably spotted that, and we made that into 2 ones because we had eliminated all the 1 bedrooms and taking that middle section out. I'm just trying to give a little variety too. I didn't know how to approach it, and that can be something we can, you're right, Fred, we can talk down the road.
Thank you for addressing the parking. I know that's a big crunch.
I was pretty proud of that.
Yeah. Ashley, Matt?
Did I mention, I'm sorry, going back to the landscaping, we're gonna buy the new linden trees for the front. I know they're not gonna be as big as the old linden trees. We're buying 3 for our beds, and Bruce is talking to the neighbors again, but we do know we're gonna offer them a bed with a 4th linden tree.
Well, again, I think that's preliminary. I'd also like to talk about shielding, you know, for the neighbors.
Yep.
In terms of, you know, not just a fence, but,
Yep.
you know, bushes. And again, I think if it's worked in conjunction with your neighbors, you know, if you're agreeable to that, I think we're looking at something that could.
If we're fortunate enough to move forward, I would bring the landscape architect in for one of the meetings. And I already spoke with her about paying her to meet with any neighbor and discussing how they could fill things in, so.
Anything else?
Yeah, I mean, some of my questions I feel like have already been maybe talked about in this opening. My first comment is when I track the building footprint, and if I multiply that by the height line to get the volume, you know, we started out at 62% taller volume than the existing building. Then I went down to 33.5% bigger than the existing building, and now we're down to 7.3%. So I wanted to acknowledge that I think we're making good strides in terms of appreciate that back and forth. My ears are still ringing from the prior 2 hours of hell I've had.
We were in the hallway.
I guess a question that I do have, and in terms of, you know, more comments come in and all sorts of things, you know, we've talked about this again and again and again and again. When I think about the couple things. Number one, in the opening comments, there was a comment that on every affordable unit, money is lost, and I appreciate that the cost of a toilet is the same. However, that's what the presence of those affordable units is what enables sidestepping of every variant. So it's kind of in my opinion, a disingenuous comment, but that notwithstanding, I understand what you're saying. I think my question, I guess, goes back to some of the questions that Fred has already asked about. It sounds like the footprint, I mean, when you look at that now and you look at the parking, you look at that sort of thing, I think it's fitting the scale much better. Am I to understand from the earlier comments that there's no wiggle room on the height or the footprint on the back building still? Is that?
We did show you a flat roof with like a colonial type border, and it's still on the table. We don't have to have that roof. That drops it actually below the need for a variance. If that was something, there's plenty of those.
Yeah, I meant in terms of like floors. I meant floors.
No, I mean, there's a minimum height for floors. You can't do much with that. It is a big roof. And
Sorry, I mean, from 3 floors to 2 floors. That's my specific.
Not without making the footprint bigger again. I mean, you can revisit that garden look where the first floor is down. We're gonna lose all our utility capabilities of putting all the stuff in there. And then unless you went with a flat roof, I don't think it's gonna be a good look, to be honest with you. If you don't care about the roof and you'd like a variety of a different type of a roof, we did show an iteration earlier, and we could work off of something like that. I don't have any problem with that. It'll actually bring us under code, under like whatever the local.
I remember that rendering, and I agree with you. It didn't look.
That was just a show, by the way. There's other versions of that too. It didn't have to be that.
I guess I'm hedging around my question, which was when I consider the waivers granted and trying to, pulling up our zoning code. I know it's not a comprehensive permit is a different thing, but it granted the least relief necessary in terms of the different setbacks and things like that. Is there what I'm hearing you say is that reducing the number of units additionally in the back becomes infeasible, and
we've gone up leveling. We've gone as far as we can, reducing units. We did all the retail. The pro forma is accurate. Our CPA went over it with us. We're both estimators. The problem when you reduce a project is the site work costs don't generally go down. You still need the 6-inch fire service, the 4-inch domestic, your drainage system. You just look at this pretty much the same solid surface, give or take. So you don't gain any reduction. The economy is in volume, which is an old saying, I guess. But so no, the answer is you can't make it smaller. And you saw if you did the quick math, the bottom line is under a number. And it's just if you spread it out over a 5-year build and sell, which we're hoping to do it in less than that. But I mean, it's just that the math doesn't work anymore. It ceases to work. Maybe some other projects set up differently without the affordable component could do a smaller version of that. But I think the goal here is to try to get the affordables in there. And even if you look at our market ones, they're not highly priced. I think it's still going to lend itself to the area and have people be able to move in and live here.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Anybody else? If not, I'll open up to a public comment. Motion to open the meeting to public comment.
Motion.
And a second.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay. Want you to know that we did receive some letters regarding this proposal after the fact in less than 48 hours prior to the meeting. However, we have received letters that were all given to the members of the planning board, and they were all read by the members of the planning board regarding this project. And it was obviously, as always, very good information and a sense of what you're looking for. So without further ado, if there's anyone who would like to offer testimony.
Hi, my name is Barry Lowe. I live at 154 Water Street. The house is on Water Street, and it's also the corner of Liberty Street. And I just wanted to let you know that I'm a former member of the planning board and also the zoning board. I've got 3 issues. The first issue is
The rear building behind the Liberty Street School is way too big. And I think it should conform to the existing law, Warren laws that regulate a second building in that neighborhood. The second item I was thinking of is if they do build a building in the back, why don't they dig the foundation? They have to put a foundation in, dig the foundation deeper and have parking underneath the second building, which would eliminate some of the parking issues that they're faced with. And then the third issue I wanted to mention is the two big trees in the front should be maintained. They should not be destroyed. They should not be cut down. And there should be a nice area in front of the Liberty Street School. So when you drive by, it looks beautiful. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
So my name is Joan Coltrane, and I live at 1 Stonegate in Warren. And I'm just puzzled. I just sat through nearly 2 hours of deliberation about a project that was too dense, too many units on too small a piece of property. We are faced with the same issue here. We're talking about building a 3-story building that's completely out of keeping with the neighborhood. We're talking about 44 bedrooms. We're talking about parking across the front of a property that's in a residential neighborhood. I am truly puzzled. I understand that the developer has attempted to respond to the concerns of the planning board. However, this project is being driven by the comprehensive permit process. That is what's leveraging this project. And I'm not opposed to affordable housing. However, we would never consider building a condo complex of this size in that location if this were not a comprehensive permit. At least that's my opinion. Maybe I'm wrong. So I am truly puzzled. How can we build a condominium complex with 44 units in that setting? And I realize that there's an economic issue for the developer. I can understand why reducing or increasing the number of 3-bedroom units seemed like the only approach. But we're talking about 3-bedroom units that are under 1,000 square feet. How easily marketable will they be? We're talking about 2-bedroom units under 750 square feet. How marketable will they be? I really can't answer that question. Perhaps there'll be no problem selling them. But I simply don't understand why we would consider a structure in our residential historic district neighborhood that looks like a commercial building, that looks like a barracks, that looks like student housing. Thank you for listening.
Thank you.
I know it's been a long evening.
And by the way, it's not 44 units. It's
No, 44 bedrooms.
No, but you said units.
Oh, I'm sorry. I apologize. I thought I said bedrooms. No, I apologize. 44 bedrooms.
Thank you.
Good evening. Eileen Collins, 26 State Street. I'm also want to address the density issue. We're looking at, Penny Lane, which was 4.5 acres, a little over 4.5 acres for 40 units. We are looking at 3/4 of an acre with 20 units. So I'm like, why are we not concerned about the density downtown? Just curious. This is a huge building. Nothing else is like it downtown. Sets a new standard. We've already had two, I think, terrible decisions. One on Norbert Street, which we have to live with under the comprehensive permit process. And then we, of course, had not affordable housing, but the addition to the mill on the waterfront. So I really hate to see another industrial building that just gets plopped down and it's like, okay, good enough. Who cares about the historic district? Well, we care about how things happen downtown because we already have a ton of density, tons of parking problems, all those things exist for us. And this building takes up a lot of, either it's a building or it's cement. That's what you've got. And downtown, like, I don't even know if it's legal to actually cement your whole backyard. I don't know what the zoning laws are on that. But, you know, I think we've got some issues too.
Good evening. My name is Ned Connors, 39 Dyer Avenue, Riverside. And I'm an historical preservation consultant and wrote the letter that was mentioned early on. One of the things I think we need to consider is that the historical significance or the architectural significance of a property does not reside solely with the building itself, but with its siting. And 147 years ago, they set aside a piece of land that would have schoolyards, space for other things attendant to the school. And the number of bullets that this building has dodged over those hundreds of being passed off as schools, that the guy had remarkable talent. And Thomas Taft eventually became a hugely important regional architect. And he furnished the plans for the Liberty Street School for the 1847 edition of Henry Barnard's book, School Architecture, a monumental book. And it was the third public high school built in the state of Rhode Island. And it's the only one surviving of the three. But what strikes me is how remarkable it is that the building still remains in its original setting. And I think to reduce the whole matter that I made in the letter to a matter of privies was disingenuous. Right? So I would like the board to just consider that this dense neighborhood made a remarkable effort 175 years ago to build a very important and very innovative school that is just a precious asset for the town of Warren. And to place I have to say it, an indifferently designed box behind it, and to occupy that much of the property for the lofty purpose of parking, is really the worst thing we could possibly be doing for our historic district. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening, Chuck Staton from the Tree Commission. I'm wondering that if the lindens come down, can we follow the Town of Warren tree administrative guidelines for the replacement of the trees that will take that from the for the lindens that come down? And on page 19, it has the number of replacement trees that should take place. Should a tree, and the tree commission measured the DBH of those two lindens. And unfortunately, it sounds like they're gonna come down. And one is like 28, they're between 28 and 36 inches. The DBH is the diameter breast height at 54 inches high. It's diameter breast height. It's a widely used measurement. And so for 25 to 35 inches, the number of replacement trees is 6. 6, that's a street tree, 2 to 2.5 inches. For 35 and above, it's 7. So I'm wondering if we can follow the administrative guidelines. So that would be 13 trees planted at 2 to 2.5 inches to replace the 2 lindens. And I'm also wondering if the tree commission can review the landscape plan that you have, that is before you. If we have time to review it as a tree commission and comment on it, that is a request that we're making. And my final point is that in the picture there, the 2 trees that were placed, that were used to represent the new vista of the school. There were 2 trees in front, and those trees, you know, I'm wondering if those 2, and they're supposed to be linden trees, that was the comment that I heard, is that the size of those 2 trees in that picture are going to be used for those 2 trees. In other words, they're not 2 to 2.5, they're a bigger size. So, you know, it shows a beautiful picture, but are those going to be 2 small trees there? Or are they going to be very large trees, you know, purchased very large trees? And I work with many landscape architects in my business. And they call out for big trees from time to time, and they can be found. So I'm not saying they're going to be that big, but that doesn't look like a tree you're going to find and plant.
Well, again, I think what we're looking at here is a sketch out of what they have in mind. I mean, I think what we're looking at, and, you know, we did talk about the linden trees in the past, but I think, again, the board would welcome the tree commission's involvement in the landscaping. I mean, clearly, we have to make the decisions under the comprehensive permit, but we would certainly welcome your participation in that and the guidance of the tree commission's recommendations.
Okay, thank you.
Sure. Yeah. Sure.
So if this moves forward, the next stage would be the preliminary plan submittal, which includes the requirement for a landscape plan. So those matters can be addressed as part of that. I would suggest that the tree commission wants to work with Mr. Lannon, they're welcome to reach out to him. The other side of that is that, again, you still own the whole process. So their input would be to whatever becomes the application of record. If there's anything that they want and can try to work out with the applicant ahead of time, that's between them. But once there is an application that's deemed complete, that will be the plans of record that you'll be dealing with, that they'll have the ability to offer recommendation to you.
Okay.
And they'll have to do it prior to your sort of situation. In other words, it's not a separate review from your comprehensive permit process.
Okay.
Okay, thank you.
Anyone else? Did you want to? Go ahead.
was brief the last time, I didn't feel allowed to.
Mr. Chair, I'm working to close public.
Oh, sorry, yeah. Motion to close, Ashley, second. Terry? All in favor?
Aye.
Just real quick, that was pretty good comments, actually. Parking under the building is not all practical. We have to put equipment in there. We're willing to look at anything, obviously, but off the face of it, doesn't sound like something that would work for us. The building that site is 100% covered solid right now. The town of Warren did it years ago. It's parking lot, it's playground, it's sidewalks. It's all paved, and you heard my engineer, even where those trees are growing behind Jimmy King's, there's all cobble there that used to be asphalt. There's just roots that grow up through there. So it's 100% coverage now, as near as we could tell. And I think we're gonna make it better than that. It's gonna drink it. We're putting in a drainage system. And in reducing this building, we're not reducing the drainage, even though we're not doing preliminary right now. That drainage system, the larger one, is gonna stay in place. As far as my good friend, Chuck Staten, we'd be more than happy to meet with him. We're willing to get the largest linden trees that can be transported safely. I work with MON Landscaping. They're the largest, at least in southern New England. I'm sure Chuck knows who they are. I've already called out to them. So that was basically it.
Okay,
Thank you.
thank you. Any comments from the board?
I do have a lingering question that's, so per our earlier conversation, your statement is that the current scope and density of the rear building is the lowest you can go and still be financially solvent on this. I guess a question that pops in my mind is when I look at the, if I take the market number of 15 and I look at what the current market retail and I take an average of that, and then if I think about that, there can be 8 units in the front existing building. And I go back and I look at the pro forma and I look at the residential construction of $4.1 million. I'm sure I'm guessing a very large portion of that is the rear building. Is it not profitable? And maybe I'm speaking out of turn on this. Can it not be profitable just to rehab the existing school as is and just forego all of the headache of putting a new building in? I mean, I understand that you're in the business of excavating and doing those things, but I guess what?
Good question. You wouldn't get any affordables. The math would be sketchy at best. I'd have to do some math, but we're here under a comprehensive permit trying to follow that guideline to create that. Maybe that's a fallback position if we wind up somewhere down the road and we have to come back in a year and we're not getting along. I don't know what else we bought the building, as you know.
Yeah.
Some of your applicants come in and they have a deal pending with the farmer or something. If we get approvals, we'll buy it. So we're here to stay. We're both from here. We already heard testimony. So this is a good project. We like this project. Down the road, who knows? I just turned 70. I don't even know if I'll be here. Like, who knows? I understand. I'm sure other people looked at that building and nobody bought it. Took me 4 months to battle with this guy. He's from New Hampshire. Bob Rulli said he'd call me a saint if I pulled it off. He was hard to deal with, I guess. And so we own it and we're trying to do the right thing. Just try to work with us. We'd appreciate it.
Anything else? Anyone? All right. A motion? And I'll make one. That we approve this conditionally for master plan with the intent of reducing as many of the 3 bedrooms as possible. That all landscaping is subject to approval by the board. And that the exterior of the second building that goes through a review process where we can take a look at the windows and the siding, the appearance of the building, so it isn't just a concrete block, which it isn't at this point, but it is it takes into consideration the environment of the neighborhood and the building in front.
Second.
Hold on a second, you also TRC conditions.
Oh, I'm sorry, yeah. And it meets all of the conditions of the TRC. The 5 TRCs.
But could we with the landscaping, could we add that to concentrate on some things like the buffer in the back? So you mentioned keeping a green space, but planting some trees that will grow higher to buffer the adjoining properties. And
Yeah,
to kind of
specifically.
very specifically, I'd like to put that in because that's the one thing that is my sticking point. I hate giving variances that encroach on other people's properties. And this one does. And so I have seen, those arborvitae trees that grow extremely high and would grow taller than the building within a few years. And so things like that, I think, to reduce the impact of neighboring, we could add that somehow.
Yeah.
I don't know if we can.
Again, just a reminder, the applicant's required to submit a landscape plan. I think he's heard some of the issues that you have. I think would it allow them to prepare and submit their application. And once it's here, you can respond to it and say, I don't like this tree here, or I want a bigger one there. You have the ability to do that at the future step.
All right.
Second.
I have a question just regarding that, Gar. What flexibility do we have with respect to the siding and the window sills and the soffits and stuff like that on the second building?
I had this discussion a little bit with the solicitor before tonight's meeting. You do have a level, while you don't have design control within the area, because you are in the historic district and the nature of the property being historic property with the school, that does give you the right to tinker with the exterior materials.
Yeah, that's how I remember. it.
Yeah,
That's
sorry,
how-
also within the bounds of the guidelines of the US Interior.
Second.
Terry? This is an approval or denial of the motion.
Yes.
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 Yes,
Yes.
Yes.
Matt?
No.
Okay.
Motion passes.
All right, that ends this. We'll see you for preliminary. Sure.
You mentioned Chuck State, possibly as someone that I might want to talk to. You mentioned maybe Chuck Staten as someone that would be available to talk to about landscaping and someone about buildings that's around that we like from.
Yeah. All right, we're gonna take a 2-minute break. A couple of things I want to make sure we,
Did John get his, he's all set?
yeah, he's all set. Okay, we have an approval of the minutes. Were there any questions or concerns?
Motion to approve the minutes of 11/27.
Second, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed? Okay, there's a schedule for next year, or this year, 2024. I don't see any problems with it, but it also can be changed as needed. So I'd make a motion to accept it.
Motion.
Second, Ashley, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Are we there? I lost my,
Thank you.
Thank you, Austin.
Hey, we got an opening.
I would have traded you with you tonight.
Wow.
You get paid to be here.
Approval of the director's report.
Yeah, you want to approval of the director's report or?
We need to approve it, or-
So,
So basically, Mr. Chairman, this has been sitting on your agenda for a couple meetings now because you rushed out of here at the tail end of your meeting.
Jeez, why would imagine?
So what I'm trying to do is to, there's statutory language for the technical review committee, but within your own sort of operating bylaws, your policies, administrative procedures, you incorporate the TRC in there. So there are some recommendations that I'll have, I think I still have to run them through town solicitor. That's how long it's been since I've looked at this. But basically what I'm trying to do is to solidify that a little bit. It's too wishy-washy right now in this community to just say it's me as the chair, the planning board person, the building official, and then sort of there's this other membership that's not named.
Yeah, and we've seen this. I mean, the problem with it is we've seen it get cuckoo. You know, two people will come from a historic district commission and have an exceptionally large voice in the TRC, more so, for example, than the DPW director or the fire chief, you know, so
Right.
there's definitely need for work here on the construction of the TRC and who's, you know, plays a role in it.
So essentially, the way I've drafted it so far is to basically have not only the three members that are already statutorily required, is to also include the DPW director. I'd like to include the solicitor, at least as an ex officio or a person that should attend those, because we do talk about things that directly impact and correlate with your particular discussions. And I think there are some discussions that we've had in a couple TRCs since I've been here where it would have been nice to have at least some solicitor advising there, even if it's through a Zoom call or something.
Yeah, no,
But
sure.
But I also respect the fact that the solicitor has to maintain a kind of a third-party objective perspective from those things as well. And then there's an allotment for other designees. And what I'm encouraging as part of this is that you at least annually look at this, as you should be looking at this annually to decide whether your operating bylaws are adequate for the coming year, to appoint anybody else. And that it's, again, you typically will witness in your meetings historic conservation, economic development, housing, maybe recreation and or arts and culture and trees. So there are a number of boards that already exist. And I think that you should decide whether, for instance, historic is a permanent member of that or not. They can come in and maybe offer they shouldn't,
it's not a public hearing during the TRC process, and that's the key, is that it's a public meeting, not a public hearing. If I choose to entertain some public comment, that's my prerogative in the middle of those things. But essentially, I don't want historic coming in and out just because it happens to be what they want to key in on. I get it. Maybe if there's a development that's proposed in the historic district,
Right.
then naturally they
Yeah.
play a role in that. But in other situations outside of that, maybe it isn't, unless, again, you qualify it by saying the building is over 100 years old or something like that. So those are the key thing that I'm dealing with, but also there are other updates that I put in here from that standpoint. What I want to do is re-collaborate with Ben and or Mark to, go through this and make sure it meets muster with them, because I don't know the statute as well as I know Vermont. And then get this back to you for action.
Great.
Okay. Sorry to take up some.
No problem. One last thing, Brett and Matt are leaving us. They've done yeoman, no gender, yeoman-like work for the planning board. It's been a pleasure and an honor to have both of you on board. You've brought a great deal to this board, and in any kind of a board that I've ever served on, this is one of the better ones. And it's because we don't always agree on things, but we agree to see each other's points of view. And that has really brought me to a much better place in terms of how I think. And I'm sure that that's true of the rest of the members of the planning board. We will miss you, damn it. Because it's hard to find people who are willing to give it the kind of dedication and service that you both have given to it. And that's going to be a challenge for us. And particularly with these comprehensive permits, it's becoming even more difficult, but I completely understand it. Both you folks have jobs, families, and very busy lives at this point in your life. It's those of us who are gentlemen of leisure have the time for this nonsense.
I'm also very grateful that you guys came tonight.
Yeah.
Like when you guys were here, I had already told my wife, I said, we're gonna have this abridged board for like the whole mob here.
Yeah, I wanted more people to catch the pitchforks, right?
Thank you for saying that. Appreciate it.
Hey, no,
It's been
a pleasure.
it really, that means a lot to me to hear that. Thank you. And I've enjoyed my time. I've learned a lot. I've been happy to be a part of the process through the ups and downs and a pandemic. I know I'm leaving, a board that's in good hands. And like you said, the only issue is just I have much more going on in my professional life now and my personal life than I did, even a year ago. And I've had to make some decisions about where my time can go. And that was it. And I appreciate you understanding. It's been a pleasure to work with everyone. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Yeah. I echo your sentiments. I took a new position in April at my job and I'm totally underwater.
Yeah.
And so it's been, anytime I'm actually show up to one of these meetings and I'm prepared, I have blown off something that I have already committed to, whether it's my family or and I know it's all the same for all of you. We're all busy, so but anyway, I am grateful that we got to come tonight, that it worked out, because it was a really unsatisfactory. All right, and the power's off. All right, I guess that's the end of. Right. So it feels good.
Not a good way.
Actually finished.
Right, finished well. So yeah, thanks for your leadership, Fred. And I will say too, my experience on this board, I was on the zoning board before, so I already mentioned that. That was not a very pleasant experience. And after my experience here, I mean, the comprehensive permit, that there's a lot to be desired in terms of that, but this has taught me I was telling my kids when I was telling them, my daughter's been home alone and she's like, probably not old enough to be home alone. But anyway, I was like, China is always my whipping boy. I'm like, in China, you don't have a planning board that's by the people. And so it's taught me that
I don't know, civic engagement and government also. It's cool. So thank you, Fred, for your leadership and everyone else's participation.
Thanks, Matt.
Yeah.
Whew. All right, motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
Second. All in favor?
Aye.